Lies of P has been out for a while, but it has received a few updates since launch. And so I'm kind of curious, as a disabled gamer and an accessibility consultant and advocate in the industry, I want to know, is the new updates, do they make Lies of P approachable or accessible? Let's find out. Hi, I'm Steve Saylor. I'm blind, and if you're wondering how I can be able to play video games or what I can see when I'm playing video games if I'm blind, you can take a look at the video here or click the link in the description down below to see exactly what I see when I'm playing video games. So yes, Lies of P is a Souls-like game that tells a retelling of the story of Pinocchio, and that is actually the reason why I wanted to jump into this, even though it has been out for a while, because I'm a sucker for I'm well, not necessarily a sucker. I love classic stories when they're remixed or redone in a way that in a completely different setting, and so I love the idea of making a steampunk style story with a bit of like a gameplay and kind of creating that, taking that classic sort of story and kind of remixing it a bit up. So that whole Pinocchio story, I love that. I love when they kind of like tie in certain things of like, okay, how does the lie mechanic work? What makes, your character P essentially a Pinocchio type character, and it's just like as a puppet. Like, I love that kind of style. So I was always interested in this, but the problem is, obviously, being a Souls-like, Souls-like and accessibility has been a constant bitter ends, or constantly bickering at each other for a long time now. It seems like almost every year there's always a new discourse about difficulty versus accessibility, and Souls-likes versus any disabled gamer that wants to play. And I do love to be able to try other Souls-like games to see what they kind of bring to the table, and potentially maybe new features that make the game a little bit more approachable or potentially accessible. So the thing is about about this review, even though it is kind of more of an impressions, because I've only played about the first hour and a half. If you want to check out that full gameplay, you can be able to check it out on my second channel, which is at Steve Saylor Plays. Make sure to go subscribe there. Also, as a reminder, if you want to be able to see more of my reviews or more of my impressions about games and talk about accessibility, make sure to like and subscribe to this video as well. So let's talk about, actually, I could probably best be me to show even some gameplay here to kind of talk about Lies of P, because I think that the thing is about these games, obviously, I will say this, it's not accessible in a lot of ways for disabled players, but there are certain things that I think do help, and also help that are good quality of life updates that also make it approachable as well. And we talked about this actually just recently. I did this for when I played Mortal Shell 2. There was a lot of quality of life improvements in a game that I think actually that really did help a lot, allow me to be able to play it and be able to kind of get a better grasp on it without getting super frustrated all the time. But I will say that I think that probably the biggest sort of let's talk about just the lack of accessibility for a sec, because I want to at least mention that. I think the biggest hurdle for me personally, for my own disability, is the font size. Like, you can see here that the font size of this is super small. The contrast is not great. The font choice, being a serif font and not a non-serif font, makes it difficult to be readable for cognitive players, for low vision, or closer to total blindness. It does not, the white on gray does not work, and so the contrast is so super low that it's harder for me to be able to read instructions, including actually to the point where I got to a boss fight, and the boss fight, there was instructions on how to be able to defeat it, or certain things that would help me out in that boss fight, but they were given instructions on the side of the screen. And because of the low contrast, I didn't even notice them at all. That's one of the big kind of issues in this. And I think that having not only just higher contrast text, but also higher contrast modes would actually also help in this. And I don't think that that would change the way that the game is played, because if you have a shader on enemies or on yourself, you can be able to tell where enemies are and kind of maybe telegraph a little bit better what the enemies are about to do when so that you can be able to either parry them or dodge out of the way. And they kind of have a little bit of that. A lot of Souls games have the ability that basically when they turn red, that usually means that they're about to do an unblockable attack. attack, so you need to dodge out of the way. And in this game, they do have that capability. They do have that, because there is a bit of an outline slash shader that happens whenever an enemy does an unblockable attack. And I think that if they went a step further and basically made this more like a higher contrast mode, I think that probably would have been better for definitely low vision. I think for deaf and hard of hearing players, there is not really a visualization for any enemies that are potentially going to attack off screen. If you want to be able to check that, see to have that, Mortal Shell 2 actually does have that, so I'd recommend maybe that if you're interested in the Souls-like. The subtitles are super small. Even having it at the largest setting, the subtitles don't really like it kind of is equivalent of more medium-sized subtitles in other games than being large in this one. And there's no other settings other than be able to just increase the font size and then just to turn the subtitles on or off. For motor disabled players, essentially having like these essentially you can remap controls, but technically you are using all the buttons on a controller, so you're really just like button swapping than necessarily remapping. So that is something that to keep in mind. And I will say that, and this helps with motor disability, but I think it also helped me too for low blindness as a potential option. Sorry, there's a lawnmower happening outside my window. If you can hear that, the little low hum. But one of the things I like is that they have this feature that allows you to be able to adjust auto lock on. You do have the ability to be able to lock on to enemies, so that the camera kind of locks onto that enemy and kind of keeps it in center as best as possible. And that happens in a lot of Souls-like games. That's not anything new. But what they did different in this is that you can actually be able to have it auto lock on, which is great. That also helps so that it moves the camera, so that way you're not fighting the camera all the time, whether you're a motor disabled player and you use the right thumbstick or the camera control stick to be able to adjust it. But also, like, as well for like blind players, it definitely keeps everything in center, so that way you're not having to try to be able to attack something that's onto the sides of your camera, or trying to find the camera in order to be able to point your character directly at the enemy. So that's great. But then an additional thing they do is that they have a setting that actually will allow you to be able to adjust when does the lock on happen. And you can set like it's a slider that allows you to be able to once you are near an enemy or an enemy's nearby, it will auto lock on for you. But then you can be able to adjust how far that lock on sort of circle, I guess, kind of happens. And it actually is a great way, so that way you're not focused on lock on an enemy that's further away when there's an enemy that's about to hit you. So when it kind of goes into that threshold that's close, if you adjust it to where it's closer to you, you don't have to worry about that. You can just automatically lock on to that enemy that's nearby, which I think is honestly a really great feature that I would love to see in other games. That not only helps out for motor disabled players, but it also will adjust for. It's great for low vision low vision or basically blind players as well. Unfortunately, there's no for blind players. There's no screen reader. There's no navigational assistance, unfortunately. So that really hasn't been a feature in Souls-like games. So that's not anything new, but it is disappointing nonetheless. But I do think that the biggest thing that does make this game a lot more approachable, but also can be in regards to accessibility, is in the fact of the difficulty modes. So at launch, the Lies of P did not have difficulty modes. It had a standard difficulty that was that was for everybody that played it, and that's been the Souls like sort of a feature for a long time. Obviously, one of the biggest discourse of Souls likes is the lack of difficulty options. The thing that actually what I appreciate is that I think that the developers really did take the feedback from players, because they wanted more players, or they wanted more players to be able to try out to play this game, because I feel there is something special about Lies of P. But they did add in a future, or basically in a post-launch update, the ability to be able to adjust your difficulty. The standard difficulty is the hardest difficulty in the game. And I've been told by my good friend Thormageddon, who does play a lot of Souls-like games, including plays Souls-like games on different controllers like potatoes, Donkey Kong bongos, and steering wheels. Make sure to go check out Thormageddon because they have played a ton of Souls-like games with that, and that's great. Like that also showcases how great accessible it is to motor disabled players, because having the ability to control, change the controls to those adaptive controllers is awesome. Thor basically mentioned to me that if they tried to be able to, like, my thought was if they tried to add if they added easier difficulties, why not add an even tougher difficulty to kind of accommodate for as many players as they want. But Thor did mention that it probably would unbalance the game if they added a much more challenging difficulty setting. So the default standard way to play is the hardest difficulty, and then the game actually the developers added 2 easier difficulties to play. So I did go with the easiest difficulty, and I did find that the game. The thing is, like, what helps me out and a lot, like why difficulty options can be beneficial. And I'll actually go full screen on this one, is that it takes the stress and the pressure off of the player. Not to say that it doesn't change the challenge rating, because the challenge is still there. This game is challenging. When I went up, I'll bring back my camera. I do want to be able to showcase. I was at a boss. I did get to the first boss. And it wasn't easy. It was definitely challenging. And it took basically the entire, it took multiple tries to be able to get it right. But having that easier difficulty took the pressure and the stress off of dying multiple times and having to be able to trying to be able to go back to certain points, because yes, it does have what they call the commune sections, which are the stargazers, and when you do go to it to be able to replenish your health, it does respawn the enemies. And if you're trying to be able to get back to a boss fight and you're having to be able to like fight off a bunch of enemies before you get back to it again, it kind of, if you are playing it and it is more challenging at the regular sort of standard difficulty, it kind of puts a lot of pressure on the player and stress to the player to try to be able to like save as much as they can before they die. Like the pressure of dying is so much more prevalent. And what I find that at least with the easier difficulty, the challenge was still there. I still, like when I played this boss, I still had to learn the patterns to be able to find the times to be able to do perfect parries, or to be able to find a ways to figure out the patterns to be able to dodge out of the way just in time, and trying to be able to time my attacks in a specific way. It allowed me to enjoy the genius level of the puzzles of fighting a boss, which is something that I've always said about Souls-like games, that they are genius level puzzles, if you will, instead of just boss fights where you're just hacking and slashing. There is a puzzle element to each Souls-like boss that it does require you to be able to figure out what you have to do and when the perfect timings of things. Now, granted, would more accessibility or more approachability, like quality of life, in improving in sort of adjusting those timings help? Yes, of course. But I like that at least in this game with Liza P, and then just by adding the difficulty, it allowed me to it takes the pressure off. Okay, if I get hit, I'm not gonna die right away. That I can be able to figure out the animations. I can figure out the patterns so I can be able to come back to that boss fight and do better. And I did get better. I will say that being able to, like, yes, it took multiple tries. It was still challenging, but I was able to defeat this boss because I was given that freedom, and that the pressure and the stress was off, that I can actually be able to just focus on what the boss was doing so I can properly know how to be able to defeat it. And I'm sure if I keep playing, I will get better at that pattern recognition as I keep trying out different bosses. So that is something I think that I really want to be able to impress upon you, is that if you're watching this and you're still like, and I appreciate you, but like if you're still kind of like, you're not sure about the adding an easier difficulty in Souls-like games is kind of ruining the experience. I hope that what I just said kind of helps with, like, kind of give a different perspective on that I still want the challenge there. The challenge is not the issue. It's basically just taking some of the pressure and the stress off of a player so that we can enjoy the challenge of the game. which is something that I think is amazing. And Keen in my chat, because I am streaming this live on Twitch, these reviews. So I actually want to be able to check out these gameplays and also my reviews when I'm recording them live. Make sure to go to my Twitch channel, twitch.tv/SteveSaylor. But Keen basically says that the enemies present some puzzle-solving mechanisms about how to approach them, learning their movement, when is safe to attack, etc. So that's great. I think that is what is genius about Souls-like, is the puzzle of figuring out how to defeat an enemy instead of just hacking and slashing, which often action-adventure games do. And that's what sets Souls-like games apart from other genres. And so that's something I think. So I will say that for approachability, this game is definitely a lot more approachable now than it was at launch. So if you're worried about it not being something that you could be able to play, it is a lot more approachable. Is it accessible? There's not enough there for me to be able to recommend this if any of the things that I showed or talked about are issues or things that you pain points for you. So I will say, if I had to give this an accessibility review score, I would probably give this a 2 out of 5. But it is a game that I still recommend at least trying if you think that the other quality of life options and features will help you out. So all right, that is going to be it for this review. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to be able to, again, see more of my reviews, you can be able to either watch them live when I do them on twitch.tv/SteveSaylor, or make sure to subscribe to this channel so you can be able to see when they go up. I've been putting up a lot more reviews lately, and I want to keep doing them. And so the more people can subscribe, the better it can be added into the algorithm, as it were. And anyway, thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions or comments, please leave in the comment section down below, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care. As always, I remain obediently yours. Bye-bye.